The wind moved gently across the silent plains, carrying with it the soft fragrance of ancient stone and earth. The landscape stretched endlessly, dotted with fragments of weathered columns and scattered carvings, each one half buried beneath centuries of dust. This place, forgotten by nearly all, was said to exist between the known regions of Johto and Sinnoh, a borderland of mist, where history had fallen asleep and the whispers of the unknown still lingered. At dawn, the light touched the ground with pale gold, unveiling the outlines of what once had been a grand city. Now only shadows remained, arches of crumbling rock, smooth stone paths leading nowhere, and walls carved with strange markings. The symbols shimmered faintly in the early light, alive in their stillness, each one an echo of something older than speech itself. The air held a strange hum, not of sound, but of presence, as though the stones themselves remembered the voices of those who once walked here. Among the ruins, the wind traced letters no human had spoken for millennia, curling through corridors of silence. The markings seemed random at first, lines, curves, circles, but together they breathed a quiet rhythm, like a hidden language woven through the earth. Long ago, the scholars of Alph had written of this place. They called it the lost city of the unknown, the cradle of meaning, where the first symbols were born. According to legend, the Unown were not mere Pokémon, but living thoughts, manifestations of consciousness itself, shaping and interpreting the world through their forms. Their alphabet was the bridge between mind and matter, between intention and creation. In those early ages, when humankind barely began to name the world, the Unown drifted freely through the veil of dimensions. They were unseen, but always near, forming patterns in the air and whispering to the dreams of those who could sense them. From their shapes, words were born. From their rhythm, language took its first breath. Every thought that followed, every song, prayer, and story was an echo of that primordial alphabet. Now, in the present, the ruins lay quiet. The forest around them had reclaimed what time had forgotten. Moss covered the stones, vines hung heavy from shattered arches, and pools of still water reflected the sky. The sunlight filtered through cracks in the stone, falling on ancient glyphs that pulsed faintly, as if remembering. The marks were arranged like constellations on the surface of the earth, a map of meaning too vast to comprehend. Far below the surface, in the quiet heart of the ruins, something stirred. Beneath layers of soil and stone, where time itself seemed slower, the Unown drifted like fragments of dreamlight. Their forms glowed with faint energy, each one a symbol, each one a letter in a language that never died. They hovered in silence, moving slowly through the air in intricate spirals, their bodies tracing the same patterns carved above. The Unown did not think as humans do. Their awareness flowed like ink through water, blending, separating, and reforming, without boundaries. Each movement was both word and meaning, emotion and idea. They were the echoes of the world's first understanding, a consciousness that did not speak, but was. As the morning light deepened, the air within the ruins shimmered faintly. Dust particles hung suspended, illuminated in soft gold. The sound of the wind grew quieter, replaced by something deeper, an unspoken vibration that resonated within the heart. It was as if the air itself remembered being shaped into words long ago. Somewhere in the distance, a lone traveler approached the edge of the forgotten valley. Their footsteps pressed gently into the moss, leaving no lasting trace. They carried with them curiosity, reverence, and the faint pull of a dream they could not explain. The ruins had called them, not through sound, but through the subtle echo that lingers in all living minds, the call of meaning waiting to be rediscovered. They reached the first archway just as the sun rose higher, revealing more of the inscriptions. Each symbol seemed alive, shifting faintly when seen from the corner of the eye. The traveler paused, letting the quiet wash over them, feeling the stillness of centuries gathered here. The stones were warm under the sunlight, But beneath that warmth was a deeper pulse, a hidden heartbeat that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. The traveler knelt beside one of the walls, tracing a finger over the carved shapes. The texture of the stone was smooth, yet it seemed to hum faintly beneath their touch. The symbol resembled an eye, simple, round, and incomplete. As the finger passed across it, a faint glow rippled outward, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. The traveler breathed softly, unsure if it was a trick of the light or something else. Then came the whisper, not heard, but felt. A ripple in thought, an impression, rather than a word. It was not language, but the surd essence of language, a feeling of recognition, of being seen by something ancient. The traveler closed their eyes, allowing the impression to flow through them. They saw flashes of shapes, floating symbols, drifting in darkness, forming and unforming like breath. The ruins around them seemed to hum in response, the faint vibration threading through stone, air, and bone alike. The symbols glowed softly, then dimmed again, as if breathing in the presence of awareness. The traveler remained still, heart calm, eyes open to the light filtering through the ruins. In that quiet, they understood. These were not mere carvings. They were alive, each one a remnant of thought, a seed of meaning, and a memory of creation. The wind shifted again, carrying with it a faint sound, like distant chimes, or perhaps the murmuring of unseen voices. The traveler looked toward the center of the ruins, where the ground seemed to dip into darkness. A faint shimmer rose from below, like light reflected off deep water. There, hidden beneath the surface, lay the heart of the lost city, the place where the first word had been spoken without a voice, and where the Unown still dreamed. As the day drew on, the traveler felt the pull of that center growing stronger, not in sound, but in presence. The ruins themselves seemed to breathe, each stone resonating faintly with unseen energy. Time slowed, the air grew thicker, and the boundary between thought and reality thinned. The journey had only begun. The light of morning moved slowly across the ruins, drawing pale ribbons of gold across the stone. Each line of sunlight revealed new markings hidden through the night, curves, dots, spirals carved so delicately that they seemed to breathe. The traveler stood still, letting the hush of the valley settle around them. Nothing stirred but the air itself, thick with memory, and something older than language. When the wind drifted across the carvings, it made no sound. Yet in the traveler's mind, something shifted, a rhythm, faint and deliberate, like the slow heartbeat of the earth. The symbols pulsed faintly beneath the moss, as though the stones were alive. It was said that every letter of the Unown's alphabet once held a voice, but not a voice of sound. It was a vibration of meaning, a resonance felt deep within the spirit. The traveler closed their eyes. The silence deepened. In that stillness, the ruins seemed to move, not outwardly, but within, the way thoughts rearrange themselves in the half-light between waking and dreaming. Shapes appeared behind closed lids, the simple forms of the unknown, floating in a black expanse without edge. They drifted like fragments of light, forming circles, lines, and eyes that watched without judgment. Each unknown radiated a soft awareness, unspoken and calm. Together they formed words that had no sound, sentences that did not need to be spoken. The traveler felt the meaning unfold like the opening of a flower. Each symbol was an emotion, a pure concept, without the confusion of speech. One represented beginnings, another memory, another the quiet movement between moments. Their alphabet was not meant to describe the world, but to become it. The traveler exhaled slowly. When their eyes opened again, the ruins around them seemed subtly changed. The carvings glimmered under the sunlight, shifting imperceptibly, as though reacting to unseen tides. Dust motes drifted through the light, their slow descent mirroring the rhythm of breath. Time itself seemed to soften here, bending to the pulse of the symbols. They began to move deeper into the site, following faint paths half hidden beneath roots and stone. The walls grew closer, narrowing into corridors where ancient script lined every surface. Each curve of the writing drew the eye forward, a trail of meaning leading into the unknown. The air grew cooler, the sound of wind fading to a low hum that resonated within the traveler's chest. The deeper they went, the more the silence grew alive. It was not empty. It carried presence, awareness, and something that felt almost sacred. The traveler reached out to brush the wall beside them. The stone was warm, faintly trembling beneath their fingertips, as though responding to a hidden pulse. The glyph beneath their hand shone dimly, one single unowned symbol, its form curved like an eye. The traveler breathed with it. The glow steadied, then softened, sinking back into the wall. A faint impression lingered. In their mind, not words, but understanding. It was as though the symbol had shared a memory of ages when the Unown moved freely across the land, shaping mountains and rivers by mere intention, their language folding reality like paper. Beyond the passage, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in shadow, and the air was filled with suspended motes of light, tiny reflections from the crystals embedded in the stone. In the center stood a monolith, covered entirely in unowned script. The carvings spiraled upward in perfect order, their forms balanced and deliberate. The traveler approached slowly. As they drew near, the symbols seemed to lift from the surface of the stone, shimmering faintly, aligning themselves in the air. Each one hovered for a heartbeat, then drifted gently back into place. It was not magic in the usual sense, but an act of remembering, language remembering how to move. The travelers stood before the monolith, feeling the hum in their chest, synchronized with the vibration of the air. Thoughts slowed, the mind emptied, until only awareness remained, a still pool reflecting the light of the Unown. The script shimmered again, and from its pattern came the faintest resonance, like a single tone sustained in eternity. It was the alphabet of silence, the original song of understanding, where every letter carried the weight of a world. Each unknown was a fragment of consciousness, and together they formed not speech, but being. The monolith was their echo, a silent remembrance of what it meant to exist in harmony with thought itself. The traveler remained motionless for a long time. The chamber seemed infinite, filled with an invisible pulse that rose and fell like breath. They felt the energy moving through them, gentle, ancient, and patient. Each inhalation carried the memory of creation. Each exhalation returned it to the stillness of the present. Somewhere deep within the stone, something answered. The faint light of the Unown. Symbols flared softly, one by one, tracing patterns across the walls. They began to move, shifting positions, their arrangement forming sentences no human could read but somehow understand. The traveler sensed the meaning without translation. To speak is to shape. To write is to remember. Then, as suddenly as it began, the motion stopped. The chamber dimmed. The wind outside sighed faintly through cracks in the stone, carrying the scent of dust and moss. The traveler blinked, the vision fading, but the feeling remaining, a calm awareness, as if part of their mind had learned to listen to the silence itself. They turned back toward the entrance, the air thick with quiet energy. The ruins did not feel abandoned anymore. They felt alive, breathing, listening, waiting. The traveler understood that this place was not meant to be found in the usual sense. It revealed itself only to those who could hear the language that existed beneath all others. The language without sound. The alphabet of silence. As the traveler stepped back into the sunlight, the hum of the chamber faded into the breeze. Yet the symbols lingered behind their eyes, glowing faintly, moving in patterns they could not forget. Above, the sky stretched endlessly, pale and vast, as if written upon by invisible words. Somewhere, unseen, the Unown drifted through the air, patient and eternal, watching the world learn once again how to listen. The traveler awoke before dawn, surrounded by the hush of the valley. The air was cool and heavy with mist, and the ruins lay cloaked beneath a silver haze. Birds had not yet begun their morning calls. The silence felt complete, a stillness so deep that even thought seemed hesitant to disturb it. The traveler sat quietly, breathing in the scent of moss and ancient stone, feeling the gentle rhythm of the world waking beneath them. The night's impressions lingered, shapes of symbols, lines of light, fragments of memory. The language of the Unown was still there, faint and translucent behind the eyes, moving like ripples across a sleeping lake. The traveler knew now that what they had felt was not imagination. The symbols had called to them, not with words, but with resonance, with thought itself. They rose slowly, brushing dust from their hands, and turned toward the heart of the ruins. The path wound between fallen arches and low walls, each one etched with faintly glowing markings. The dawn light crept through the mist, falling in ribbons across the stones, and in that light the carvings shimmered, soft pulses of awareness, waking as the sun returned. The traveler walked in silence, careful not to disturb the still air. The ruins responded to presence, not sound. Every step felt guided, as if unseen eyes watched with patient understanding. The air grew warmer as the mist began to lift, revealing more of the ancient city. Corridors broken by time, statues leaning into the earth, fragments of what had once been meaning carved into matter. Then came the first pulse. It was subtle, a soft vibration beneath the feet, like the breath of the earth exhaling. The traveler stopped. The vibration grew stronger, not violent, but rhythmic, steady, like the slow beating of a great heart. The soundless pulse resonated through the stones, through the air, and finally through the traveler themselves. The walls responded. Faint light began to move across the glyphs, each symbol glowing briefly before fading, as though the ruins themselves were communicating. The pattern was deliberate, careful, alive. The traveler watched, entranced, as the sequence unfolded, a wave of meaning rippling outward through stone and shadow. It was the call of the unknown. The traveler closed their eyes and listened, not with ears, but with awareness. Shapes began to form in the darkness behind their eyelids. First a few letters, then many, drifting freely through space. Each one shimmered with its own hue, faint but distinct. The letters aligned slowly, their movements purposeful, graceful. They formed not words, but something older, intention. A sensation passed through the traveler like a whisper carried on water. It was the same impression as before, an idea, not a sound. It spoke of memory, of continuity, of language that lives even when no one speaks it. The symbols seemed to say, "We remember what was thought before words were born." The traveler exhaled, and the light around them dimmed. The pulse of the ruins faded again to stillness. But within that stillness, something remained changed. The connection was open. The air felt charged, full of unseen meaning. The traveler could sense the presence of the Unown now, not as forms, but as patterns of awareness moving in and out of existence. They descended deeper into the valley, toward where the ruins sank into the earth. A staircase, cracked and uneven, led downward through a narrow passage lit by shafts of filtered light. Moss hung from the ceiling in threads, glistening with droplets. The air grew cooler, denser, alive with a soft, humming quiet. At the bottom, the corridor widened into a vast circular chamber. The walls were smoother here, almost polished, and covered entirely with symbols. Every surface was etched with precision, each letter carefully placed beside another, forming long spirals of text that wrapped around the chamber like a flowing current. In the center stood an altar of black stone, untouched by age. Around it, faint trails of dust and small stones floated slightly above the floor, suspended by an unseen force. The traveler felt their breath slow as they approached. Time itself seemed to pause, holding the air in reverent stillness. The traveler placed a hand on the altar. The surface was warm, pulsing faintly. The symbols carved into it began to shimmer, faint at first, then stronger. The letters lifted slowly into the air, separating from the stone like embers rising from a quiet fire. They circled the traveler in slow arcs, drifting like fragments of thought. The world fell away. For a moment, there was only the void, soft, infinite, and weightless. The traveler saw, not with eyes, but with understanding. The Unown drifted all around, each one a living shape of consciousness. They did not move randomly. Their paths intertwined like the threads of a great tapestry. Together, they formed meaning, the architecture of reality itself. The traveler sensed the essence of their existence. They were letters of creation, each form representing an idea that once shaped the fabric of the world. Some carried the essence of fire and movement. Others held the memory of water, reflection, and time. Some spoke of thought, emotion, beginnings, and ends. Their alphabet was the blueprint of existence, the pattern from which everything emerged. In the quiet, a realization unfolded. The unknown were not remnants. They were continuing. The world above moved and changed, but the symbols beneath it sustained meaning itself, keeping thought alive even as civilizations faded. A soft pulse rippled through the void. The Unown turned their eyes, those strange, singular orbs of light, toward the traveler. There was no fear, no expectation, only presence. A voice emerged, not a sound, but a thought that filled the heart. All language returns to silence, but silence remembers. The traveler felt warmth spread through their chest, a peaceful stillness beyond comprehension. The letters began to dissolve back into the air, one by one, their light dimming until only the darkness of the chamber remained. The hum faded. The floating dust settled gently to the ground. When the traveler opened their eyes again, the altar stood silent before them. The markings were still faintly glowing, but their movement had ceased. The chamber was quiet once more, filled only with the sound of slow breathing and the steady rhythm of the traveler's heart. They stepped back, gazing at the walls that surrounded them. The spiraling symbols now seemed clearer, the lines of connection visible like rivers of thought running through stone. It was as if the ruins had shared a secret, and then gone still again, patient as always. The traveler bowed their heads slightly, in silent acknowledgement of the presence that watched unseen. They understood now that this place was not a ruin. It was alive, eternal, waiting for those who could feel its pulse. As they turned to leave the chamber, the last of the light flickered across the walls. The Unown's eyes, faint and distant, shimmered one final time before fading into the dark. The call had been heard. The silence of the alphabet had spoken. Morning light rose slowly over the valley, touching the upper edges of the cliffs and spreading warmth through the mist. The traveler stood at the edge of the ruins, watching the world shift from silver to gold. The air was filled with stillness, but beneath it, something stirred, an echo that seemed to rise from the stones themselves. The ruins were not quiet. They were breathing, remembering. The traveler followed the same narrow path that wound between fallen pillars and crumbling walls, now illuminated by the sun. For the first time, the landscape revealed its full shape. What had seemed a scattered collection of ruins was, in truth, the outline of a vast city long buried by time. The foundations formed perfect geometry, radiating outward from the chamber below, the heart of the ancient world. Every wall bore markings, inscriptions that blended artistry and meaning. The traveler traced them with their hand, feeling faint warmth in the grooves of the stone. The Unown's alphabet appeared everywhere, sometimes clear and deliberate, sometimes half-faded and broken by centuries of erosion. But together, They formed a pattern, like veins beneath the skin of the city. The symbols were not decoration. They were structure, the very framework that held the place together. The traveler walked through what had once been wide streets, now overgrown with moss and scattered with fragments of stone. They could almost sense movement here, a rhythm of life that had once filled these spaces. The city had not been abandoned. It had simply fallen asleep. They imagined the city as it once was. Towers rising like pillars of thought, bridges connecting minds as much as places, plazas alive with quiet exchange. The people who lived here must have understood the Unown's language, not as letters, but as essence. Their world had been built on understanding rather than control. Words were sacred, for each symbol held a pulse of creation, and to speak carelessly was to disturb the balance of the world. As the traveler wandered deeper, they reached an open courtyard. The ground here was smooth and circular, etched with a massive symbol, an unknown form so large it could only be seen clearly from above. Around it, pillars formed a ring, each carved with sequences of glyphs. The traveler walked slowly around the circle, following the letters with their eyes. Each one radiated calm, its form familiar yet distant, like a melody remembered from a dream. They paused at one pillar where the writing was unusually dense. The pattern spiraled upward, and at its center, a single unknown eye was carved deeply into the stone. The traveler stared into it, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade. They saw the city alive again. It appeared not as an image, but as a memory, vast and clear. The air was filled with soft light, and everywhere symbols drifted through the air like living thoughts. The people of the city moved in harmony, their gestures weaving invisible patterns that shaped the environment around them. Buildings grew at will, responding to the movement of their minds. The Unown floated above, their forms shimmering with radiant color, guardians of meaning and keepers of balance. Each structure hummed faintly, alive with resonance. The travelers sensed that these people communicated not through speech, but through intent, each thought carried by the symbols they formed. Language had no sound here. It was felt directly. Words were unnecessary, because understanding was complete. The traveler could feel the peace that had filled this place. No chaos, no noise, only the steady rhythm of thought made visible. Every part of the city worked in harmony with every other. Guided by an ancient awareness, the Unown drifted freely, their letters forming new connections, shaping emotion into matter and matter into memory. Then, faintly, something changed. The light dimmed, not by shadow, but by tension. The symbols that once moved with fluid grace began to distort, their forms trembling slightly. The traveler sensed fear, not from the Unown, but from the people. They had begun to shape words, not to express, but to command. The balance of thought and creation was shifting. The power of meaning, once shared, became something to possess. The Unown's movements grew erratic, their forms scattered across the city, their letters breaking apart. The air vibrated with confusion. Some symbols dimmed and vanished, others multiplied uncontrollably. The perfect geometry of the city began to warp as intention fractured. Meaning itself was unraveling. And then came the silence. The vision faded. The travelers stood again in the ruined courtyard, the great unknown symbol beneath their feet now cold and still. The sun had climbed higher, its light sharp against the worn stones. The warmth of the vision lingered only as a faint ache in the chest, a memory of peace and loss intertwined. They understood now. The city had not fallen to war or disaster. It had dissolved under the weight of its own language. The people who had once shaped reality with thought had forgotten the stillness that gave meaning its strength. They had tried to speak louder than silence, and in doing so had lost their harmony. The Unown, bound to the rhythm of meaning, had retreated into the folds of the world. Some were sealed within the ruins, others scattered across dimensions, hiding within reflections and dreams. Their language, Once the bridge between thought and form had become a mystery again, a secret waiting for rediscovery. The traveler knelt beside the great symbol, tracing its outline with slow, deliberate movement. The air shimmered faintly, as though acknowledging the gesture. They whispered a silent thought, not in words but in emotion, a promise of remembrance. The symbol pulsed once, softly, and then fell still. As the traveler rose, the wind carried the faintest echo through the ruins, a tone so subtle it could have been imagined. It was not a voice, but something more elemental, the breath of the city itself, exhaling after centuries of silence. The traveler continued onward, moving toward the far end of the ruins where the cliffs met the horizon. There, the path descended into shadow, where the heart of the lost city waited. The light behind them faded, replaced by the cool whisper of stone and the presence of memory. Each step felt slower now, deliberate, as though the traveler was not merely walking through space but through the layered memory of creation itself. The symbols followed, glowing faintly along the walls as they passed, guiding them deeper into the ancient pulse of the world. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, the Unown watched, their eyes like stars, silent, patient, remembering everything that had ever been said and everything that had been lost. The descent into the lower ruins was slow. The traveler moved carefully, guided by faint light and instinct. The air grew dense, filled with a deep, still silence that pressed gently against the senses. The faint glow of the glyphs traced a quiet path ahead, each symbol flickering softly like breathing embers. The staircase wound downward, curling through layers of stone. The traveler's footsteps made no sound, only the soft rustle of fabric and the low, rhythmic echo of their breath accompanied the journey. With every step, the light from above grew dimmer until only the pale luminescence of the Unown script illuminated the way. The walls were alive with carvings, tens of thousands of symbols arranged in long, flowing lines. Some glowed faintly, others remained dark and dormant. As the traveler ran their hand along the surface, they felt subtle warmth beneath their fingers, as though each symbol held a fragment of life still pulsing deep inside. A faint sound drifted through the air. It was not a voice, not quite a sound at all, but something between vibration and thought. The traveler stopped, listening. The whisper came again, soft and rhythmic. It felt ancient, familiar, yet indecipherable. The unknown language, perhaps, echoing through the stone, not as words, but as presence. They stood still and allowed the sound to move through them. The walls responded faintly, a pulse of light running along the carvings, like the slow movement of breath. It began to form a pattern, shifting gently from one symbol to another. The traveler realized that the walls were not silent. They were remembering. The faint hum deepened. For a moment, the air shimmered, and the traveler saw shapes. Brief, translucent images formed of light and dust. The outlines of figures appeared, moving through the ruins as they once had when the city was alive. Their forms were vague, fragile, built from memory and echo. They drifted past without noticing the traveler. Their gestures slow, deliberate, peaceful. The traveler watched as these ghosts of thought moved gracefully through the corridor. Their bodies seemed to flicker in rhythm with the glyphs, as though their essence was drawn directly from the language carved into the walls. They were not spirits of people, but memories of meaning, fragments of the past repeating themselves in the present. The traveler continued onward, moving deeper into the ancient hall. The hum grew stronger, rising and falling like waves upon the shore. The symbols along the walls began to pulse in harmony, a language of light too vast to comprehend all at once. Yet beneath it, there was emotion, something universal and unmistakable, longing. The city was remembering its people. As they walked, the whispers took form within the traveler's mind, impressions rather than words. They spoke of creation, of unity, of the bond between thought and being. They spoke of a time when every symbol had purpose, when each shape carried the vibration of understanding. The people had once lived in perfect harmony with their language, their every thought shaping the flow of the world. And then came the memory of silence, a stillness that grew not from peace, but from loss. The traveler felt it in their chest, a faint pressure, as though the air itself mourned. The symbols dimmed briefly, their glow fading like a sigh. The images in the corridor dissolved into dust. The hum weakened. Only the faint flicker of a few unknown glyphs remained, their light fragile but enduring. The traveler placed their hand upon one of the glowing symbols. It trembled faintly under their touch. Then, without warning, light surged outward, spreading across the wall in a wave of motion. The carvings shifted, rearranging themselves, forming a new pattern right before their eyes. A door appeared where there had been only stone. It was not built but revealed, emerging from within the wall itself. The symbols around it pulsed gently, their movement slow and deliberate. The traveler stepped forward. The door was made entirely of script, lines of unknown letters flowing together into a seamless surface. As they approached, the center glowed brighter, then began to open with a slow, graceful motion. Beyond lay a vast chamber unlike any before. The air shimmered faintly, and every wall was covered in glyphs so numerous they seemed endless. The ceiling arched high above, vanishing into darkness. The chamber's center was marked by a large circular pool of still water, its surface perfectly reflective. The glow of the symbols rippled across it like moving stars. The traveler stepped closer. The water was so clear that it reflected not only the room, but also something deeper, shapes and light that moved below the surface, like thoughts drifting in sleep. The traveler knelt, gazing into the pool. The reflection shimmered, and for a moment, the traveler saw not themselves, but hundreds of unknown swirling beneath the surface. Their eyes blinked, slowly, each one reflecting awareness. They were not trapped. They were resting, existing in a dimension just beneath perception. Their movements were synchronized, forming intricate symbols that appeared briefly before dissolving. The water trembled softly with their motion. The traveler reached out and let their fingertips touch the surface. The reflection rippled. The world shifted. For an instant, everything vanished. There was no light, no sound, only a sense of infinite depth. The traveler felt themselves falling, not through space, but through meaning, as though descending through layers of thought. The Unown were all around, their forms pulsing with radiant energy. Their presence was vast, yet gentle, surrounding the traveler like a living current. A thought emerged from the silence. All words come from silence, and all silence holds their echo. The traveler understood. The ruins were not merely structures, they were consciousness itself. The memory of language made stone. The walls whispered because they remembered the act of creation. Every surface, every symbol, was a remnant of thought preserved through eternity. The traveler opened their eyes to find themselves back in the chamber. The water was still again, the reflection calm. The symbols along the walls glowed softly, steady, and warm. The whispers had faded to a low, steady hum that resonated gently in the chest. They stood in silence, breathing slowly, aware that the ruins were watching, listening, and remembering. The air itself felt alive, filled with meaning beyond comprehension. As they turned to leave, one final pulse of light moved through the walls, traveling along the glyphs like a wave. The faint sound of whispering rose again, soft, melodic, fading into stillness. It carried no words, only presence. The traveler ascended slowly toward the surface. Behind them, the chamber grew dim, the glow of the glyphs fading one by one, until only darkness remained. But the whispers did not stop. They followed the traveler upward, moving through stone and air, until they were indistinguishable from the sound of the wind. Above, the valley waited beneath the pale afternoon sky. The ruins were quiet once more. Yet the silence was different now, deeper, knowing. The traveler looked back one last time. For a heartbeat, they thought they saw the walls pulse faintly, as though acknowledging their presence. And then all was still. The whispers of the Unown lingered only in memory, woven into the rhythm of the traveler's breath, silent, eternal, waiting to be remembered again. Evening descended upon the valley with a quiet grace. The sky faded from gold to violet, and the light that touched the ruins softened into deep amber shadows. The travelers stood upon the edge of the courtyard, the stone beneath their feet cool and smooth. The air had grown heavier, but not oppressive. It felt sacred, as if the very atmosphere held the breath of something awakening. They had spent much of the day moving among the ruins, tracing symbols, listening to the faint hum that lingered in the stone. But as the sun dipped behind the horizon, the energy of the place began to change. It was subtle at first, a faint shimmer at the edge of vision, the soft pulse of a glyph responding to the dimming light. Then, slowly, the feeling deepened. The air began to vibrate, delicate but constant, a resonance that reached beneath thought. The traveler sat upon a low stone wall and closed their eyes. They let their breath fall into rhythm with the vibrations of the ruins. It was not a sound, but a sensation, an invisible current moving through the air. Beneath it, they could sense motion, faint and deliberate, as if the Unown themselves were stirring. For a long moment, nothing moved. The world was still. The sky deepened into darkness, the first stars trembling faintly above. Then, from somewhere deep within the ruins, a soft luminescence began to rise. It was not fire nor reflection, it was language given form, the glow of meaning returning to motion. The symbols carved into the walls lit one by one, each awakening in silence. They did not flicker like torches. They bloomed, gently, their light flowing outward, as if breathing. The traveler opened their eyes and watched as patterns emerged across the stone, sentences forming, dissolving, reforming again. The entire city seemed to exhale, awakening after centuries of sleep. From the far side of the courtyard came the first shape, a curved shadow of light, faint and pale, drifting through the air. It floated, with no effort, no sound, just presence. Its form was simple, a single unknown letter, its body composed of pure radiance. It turned slowly, its eye fixed upon the traveler, unblinking, calm. Then another appeared, and another. They came from every direction, rising from cracks in the earth, from the walls, from the very air itself. Dozens of Unown, each shimmering faintly, their light moving like water, their bodies twisted slowly through the air, tracing loops and spirals, weaving around each other in graceful rhythm. They did not speak, yet the silence between them was alive with meaning. The traveler remained still. The presence of so many Unown was not frightening. It was humbling. Each form radiated peace, awareness, and quiet power. Together, they formed constellations of thought, aligning themselves in patterns that resonated through the air. The vibration deepened, filling the ruins with a low hum that seemed to exist everywhere at once. The traveler sensed that this was not an arrival, but a remembering. The Unown were returning to a state of connection, gathering in harmony as they once had when the city lived. Their forms pulsed gently, their light reflecting against the ancient stones. It was as though thought itself had become visible, free of sound or word. the Unown began to move together. Slowly at first, they drifted into alignment, forming circles, spirals, and lines across the air above the courtyard. The traveler watched as the symbols arranged themselves into coherent sequences, vast sentences written upon the sky. Each letter glowed softly, blending with the next in seamless flow. The meaning was not spoken, yet it was clear. The traveler felt it as emotion rather than word, a sense of reunion, of balance restored. The Unown were not communicating with the traveler but through them, using their presence as a point of resonance. The human consciousness served as a bridge between silence and meaning. The air shimmered. The world began to blur. The traveler felt a gentle pull, like the current of a slow river. The Unown moved closer, their light intensifying until it filled every corner of the courtyard. The hum deepened, resonating through the chest, the ground, the air. For a moment, everything existed as vibration. No boundaries, no separation. In that stillness, images unfolded within the traveler's mind. They saw the city again, alive and whole. The Unown floated above its towers, tracing patterns across the sky. The people moved below, calm and centered, their gestures shaping the rhythm of the world. The language of the Unown was not just communication, it was creation. Every symbol carried intention, and intention became form. The vision shifted. The traveler saw vast plains stretching beyond the city, rivers flowing in patterns that mirrored the alphabet itself, mountains curved in the shapes of letters. The world was written in the same script, as if nature and language were one. Then the vision dimmed. The Unown's light softened, and the air cooled. The hum began to fade, but not entirely. It settled into a steady rhythm, quiet and infinite, like the heartbeat of the ruins. The Unown drifted apart, floating in slow, measured patterns. Some lingered above the traveler, their eyes glowing faintly. Others disappeared into the air, their forms dissolving like mist. The traveler remained seated, the glow of the gathering still lingering in their sight. They could feel a change within themselves, a stillness, but deeper, as though part of their mind had expanded beyond the boundaries of thought. The language of the Unown was no longer incomprehensible. It was something they could feel. A few Unown hovered close, their movements calm and deliberate. Their eyes blinked in unison, each motion carrying meaning. The traveler understood. You are listening. And then, as silently as they had come, the Unown began to disperse. One by one, they drifted upward into the night sky. Their faint light merged with the stars until it was impossible to tell where the symbols ended and the cosmos began. The hum grew fainter still, fading into silence. When the last of them vanished, the ruins returned to stillness. The only light came from the moon, pale and gentle across the stones. The traveler sat quietly, eyes half closed, breathing in the cool air. The resonance remained within them, a memory of soundless connection. They rose at last and looked to the sky. The stars above shimmered faintly, arranged in subtle, deliberate constellations. To anyone else, they would seem random, but to the traveler, they formed words. The world itself was still speaking, quietly, patiently, through the light of the Unown scattered across the heavens. The traveler smiled faintly, a gesture of understanding and gratitude. Then they turned toward the dark horizon, where the ruins gave way to the open desert beyond. The wind whispered softly against the stones, carrying traces of the hum that had filled the valley moments before. The night was silent once again, but it was a living silence, full of meaning. The Unown had gathered, and the world remembered its language. Dawn returned quietly, folding over the valley in gentle layers of gold and blue. Mist still clung to the low stones of the ruins, drifting lazily in the cool morning air. The traveler awoke beneath the open sky, surrounded by stillness so complete that the sound of their breath seemed distant, like the memory of a tide receding. The night before had changed the world. The unknown had gathered, and their light had left traces upon the stones and the heart alike. Even now the ruins held a quiet hum, faint but constant, as if the echoes of their presence lingered in the earth itself. The traveler sat for a long while, listening. There was no fear in the silence, only peace, deep and endless. As the first beams of sunlight touched the glyphs carved into the walls, a faint resonance stirred. It began as a low vibration, then deepened into a rhythm that spread through the ground, through the traveler's bones, through the very air. The glyphs began to glow once again, softly, their light, gentle and measured, pulsing in time with the unseen beat. The traveler understood. The city was singing. It was not a song of sound, but of pattern and motion. Every symbol, every Unown that still lingered in unseen form, vibrated at a specific frequency. Together, they formed a harmony too vast for the ear to hear, yet impossible for the heart to ignore. The traveler closed their eyes and let the rhythm flow through them. At first it was subtle, a vibration like wind moving across still water. Then it grew clearer, more intricate. The soundless notes formed layers upon layers, weaving through one another like threads of light. Each vibration carried meaning, some of joy, others of sorrow, some that spoke of beginnings and endings at once. It was the song of letters, the eternal melody of thought shaping the world. The traveler's breathing slowed, falling in sync with the rhythm. The hum became something greater, a voice without words, timeless and immense. They could feel it, echoing through the ruins, through the mountains beyond, through the air above. The language of the Unown had never been meant to be read or spoken. It was meant to be heard in silence, to be felt in stillness. Images began to unfold behind the traveler's closed eyes. They saw the flow of existence itself as a vast script, each event a letter, each life a word, each memory a sentence, written in the unseen alphabet of creation. The Unown were not merely letters of a language. They were the vibration of understanding that connected all things. The melody deepened. It was neither happy nor sad, but eternal. The traveler sensed time expanding, folding outward until moments lost their meaning. The ruins, the valley, the mountains, everything moved within the same gentle rhythm. The air shimmered faintly as the unseen unknown began to gather once again, drawn to the resonance. One by one, they appeared. Small, luminous shapes floating above the stones. Their light moved in harmony with the rhythm, each pulse aligning perfectly with the next. Together, they formed great spirals of motion, the patterns of their flight shaping the air itself. The traveler felt the world breathe in unison with them. The Unown moved as music would, rising, falling, circling, and returning to stillness. Their bodies emitted faint trails of light, weaving patterns that dissolved as quickly as they appeared. The air shimmered with invisible energy. The traveler realized that this was the essence of language before it became form. The pure vibration of awareness made visible for those who could listen. They stood slowly, moving with care, as if afraid to disturb the fragile balance. The light flowed around them, enveloping their body in soft radiance. The unknown moved closer, circling gently, their eyes calm and unblinking. They were not separate beings, but notes of the same song, fragments of the same infinite idea. The hum grew stronger, rising from a low vibration to something vast and resonant. The traveler felt it fill every corner of their being, dissolving the boundary between thought and sound, between self and world. The song carried them outward, beyond perception, into a space of pure awareness. They saw galaxies turning, like symbols written across endless darkness. They saw light forming into stars, stars into worlds, worlds into living shapes. Each movement was a phrase of the song, each creation a syllable of the eternal word. The same melody that vibrated within the ruins also pulsed within the stars. Everything sang in the same voice. For a timeless moment, the traveler understood that language and existence were not separate things. To write was to shape. To think was to sing. Every being, every whisper, every silence was a note in the same endless composition. When the traveler opened their eyes again, the ruins glowed softly beneath the morning sun. The Unown floated around them, still humming their invisible song. Their light was dimmer now, gentle, steady, peaceful. The melody began to slow, the rhythm dissolving back into stillness. One by one, the Unown drifted away, fading into air, like fragments of mist carried by wind. The traveler remained standing in the center of the courtyard, the last echoes of the song vibrating faintly in their chest. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, alive with the residue of sound. The ruins no longer felt ancient or broken. They felt awake, vibrant, patient. The traveler closed their eyes once more and listened. Somewhere deep within, the song continued, faint but unending, resonating with every heartbeat. It was the same song that moved the stars, that spoke through water and stone and air, the same song that had been forgotten and was now remembered. They opened their eyes to the horizon. The light had changed again, soft gold spreading across the distant cliffs, the sky a pale blue, whispering of day. The traveler smiled faintly, feeling no need to move quickly. The world was still singing, even in silence. They began to walk. The stones beneath their feet seemed lighter, as if carrying the memory of sound. The wind brushed past, carrying a faint hum that might have been imagination, or might have been the echo of the Unown's melody continuing on, hidden beneath the folds of the world. The ruins behind them glowed briefly one last time, then grew still. But the traveler knew that the song would never fade entirely. It would remain woven into the air, the earth, and every thought yet to be spoken. The song of letters was not finished. It had never been finished. It was the rhythm of existence itself, endless and serene, repeating through all things, reminding the world that silence and sound were one and the same. The afternoon sunlight poured softly into the ruins, moving in slow waves, as if time itself had grown tired of rushing. The traveler sat beneath the arch of a half-fallen wall, resting their hand upon the cool stone. The hum that had filled the air at dawn was quiet now, yet its rhythm lingered somewhere beyond sound, a faint pulse that seemed to echo within the chest, rather than the ear. The city of the Unown no longer felt like a collection of stones. It felt alive, breathing quietly beneath the earth. The symbols carved into its walls seemed to shimmer when touched by sunlight, not glowing as before, but reflecting faint colors that shifted like thought itself. Each glyph appeared to change when viewed from a new angle, as though responding to the observer's presence. The traveler watched these shifting forms in silence. The more they stared, the more they realized that the symbols no longer behaved as fixed shapes. They were mirrors, subtle and responsive. A curve would deepen into a spiral. A line would soften into a wave. Each change followed no external command, only the quiet rhythm of attention. They began to understand. The language of the Unown was not meant to describe the world. It was the world, responding to every thought and perception that touched it. Meaning, it seemed, did not exist outside the self. It bloomed wherever awareness was directed. A gentle wind moved through the courtyard, stirring the dust. The faint glimmer of Unown light shimmered briefly across the stones, The traveler felt the pull of memory, the first time they had seen the floating letters, the way they had moved in perfect harmony, the way their silence had spoken more clearly than any word. Now, those same letters appeared again, faint and scattered, drifting slowly through the warm air. They moved without purpose, as if waiting for something. The traveler stood and stepped closer, reaching out a careful hand. The Unown did not retreat. Instead, they aligned themselves into a single row before the traveler, their eyes open, and still, one by one, they began to shift, each changing shape, morphing into new symbols. The traveler felt each transformation not as an image, but as a sensation, a wave of thought moving through their body. Every letter seemed to reflect a state of mind: curiosity, peace, confusion, hope. They realized that the Unown were mirroring them, translating feeling into visible form. For a moment, the traveler was overcome with the vastness of it. Language had always been something separate, a tool to explain the unseen. But here, language was the unseen itself, the reflection of consciousness made visible. The ruins were not just ruins, they were a mirror for the mind, showing the pattern beneath all understanding. The Unown moved again, forming a circle around the traveler. Their bodies pulsed in rhythm with the traveler's heartbeat, the air trembling slightly with each breath. Light gathered between them, soft and colorless, forming a thin veil of brightness that hovered like mist. Within that glow, the traveler could see faint reflections, faces, places, memories, all woven into one shifting image. They saw themselves standing at the entrance of the ruins, hesitant and unsure. They saw the Unown rising like stars. They saw their own face reflected in the glow of symbols, both observer and observed. Each image dissolved into another, until it became impossible to tell which was the world and which was thought. The traveler understood then that the Unown were not guardians of a language. They were guardians of reflection. Every symbol they created was both a message and a mirror, showing what lay beneath the surface of perception. The light around them deepened, no longer merely bright, but resonant. The Unown rotated slowly in unison, their movement precise and deliberate. The symbols they formed began to repeat, creating patterns that shimmered and folded into themselves. The air felt dense, almost liquid, filled with the hum of meaning, reshaping itself. Then, without warning, the travelers saw their own thoughts appear in the air before them, unspoken, unformed, yet visible as patterns of light. The feeling of wonder, the pulse of calm, the faint thread of fear, all appeared as delicate glyphs, swirling gently through the air. Each thought became symbol, and each symbol dissolved again into light. The experience was overwhelming, yet peaceful. The traveler realized that they were not controlling the process. The symbols arose and faded on their own, like breath. Meaning was not something to possess, but something that passed through. The veil of light shimmered, and the reflections began to shift outward. The ruins themselves changed subtly, the cracks between stones forming letters, the pattern of dust on the ground, aligning into symbols. Even the shapes of clouds above the valley seemed to echo the hidden alphabet. The entire world had become a mirror for the traveler's awareness, each detail a response to attention. They knelt slowly and touched the earth. The stone was warm beneath their fingers, humming faintly. For a moment, the traveler felt no boundary between self and world. Every heartbeat echoed in the rhythm of the Unown's light, every breath mirrored by the wind. They realized that this was what the ancients had known. The city had never fallen into ruin. It had simply faded when no one remained to perceive it. The Unown existed where consciousness met silence. Without an observer, their language slept. With attention, it awoke again. The Unown drifted higher, forming a spiral that reached toward the open sky. The symbols pulsed one last time, each letter reflecting a fragment of the traveler's mind: hope, awe, calm, and the quiet certainty that understanding did not come from knowing, but from seeing. Then the light faded, and the sky grew still. The ruins stood unchanged, yet different, their stones now alive with quiet awareness. The traveler breathed deeply, their reflection lingering faintly on the polished surface of a fallen stone. It no longer looked like just a reflection. It shimmered, shifting subtly, as though the world beyond the mirror were moving. They smiled softly. The language of the Unown One was not a riddle to be solved. It was the endless exchange between self and world, the mirror of meaning that joined thought and existence. As the sun lowered beyond the valley, the traveler stood once more. They turned toward the horizon, the faint hum of the ruins following them, soft and steady. The reflection would remain long after they left, for in truth, the world itself was the mirror, and every gaze, every silence, every moment of wonder added a new symbol to its unending song. The traveler awoke in the soft light of dawn, the ruins bathed in a muted gold that filtered through the distant mountains. The air smelled faintly of moss and stone, and the valley lay still, holding its breath as if the world itself were listening. The hum of the unknown lingered faintly, echoing through the quiet corridors of memory. They walked slowly among the ruins, their steps deliberate, mindful of the soft touch of time on stone. The previous days had taught them patience, a way to move not as a visitor, but as a part of the city's pulse. Every glyph they touched, every symbol they traced, carried the memory of understanding, the whispers of an intelligence older than speech itself. As they passed through a long corridor lined with spirals of glyphs, the traveler felt something different. The symbols were faint, almost imperceptible, their light dimmed by the years. Yet within the shadows of the carvings, a rhythm emerged, a hidden pattern beneath the visible letters. The traveler leaned closer, following the subtle vibration, and sensed a voice beneath the silence. It was not sound. It was not thought. It was something deeper. Memory, preserved within the very shapes of the Unown. Each glyph carried fragments of an ancient language, a tongue older than human words, a pattern of awareness that had once connected everything. The traveler realized that the language itself had never been truly lost. It had only faded from human perception. The ruins seemed to respond to this realization. Faint light emerged from the glyphs, pulsing in soft waves across the walls. The traveler walked slowly, letting the patterns rise beneath their fingers. As they moved, the letters shifted and reformed, revealing glimpses of their original purpose. The Unown had not been merely symbols. They had been conduits, vessels through which thought and reality intertwined. Images arose in the traveler's mind, not like visions, but like echoes. The first cities, built from stone and intention. The first humans who had discovered the unknown, reading their silent song as if it were wind across the mountains. The gradual fading, as people turned to words that could be spoken and written, losing the subtle resonance of thought made form. The traveler felt a quiet sorrow, not for the unknown, but for the understanding that had been lost to haste. The language had been meant to teach, to connect, to make the invisible tangible. Instead, it had been forgotten, tucked beneath layers of noise, buried beneath centuries of ordinary words. They reached the heart of the ruins, where the largest monolith of all stood, etched with thousands of letters spiraling to the sky. The surface shimmered faintly as the traveler approached. The glyphs pulsed in gentle waves, and for the first time, a full pattern emerged. The lost language was no longer fragments. It was whole, flowing in a rhythm that could be felt as much as seen. The traveler pressed their hands to the monolith, and the patterns responded. Light and motion intertwined, forming sequences that radiated meaning into the air. They sensed the words without speaking them. Concepts of creation, of balance, of silence, and thought. The letters were alive, vibrating with a subtle force, that resonated deep within. It became clear. The language of the Unown was not meant for ordinary speech. It was not to be written or read in a conventional sense. It existed to shape perception, to align awareness with the rhythm of the world. To speak it in words was to reduce it. To understand it was to feel its pulse. The traveler walked around the monolith, letting their fingertips trace the grooves of the symbols. Each touch sent a ripple through the ruins, a faint vibration that echoed in the chest and mind. They felt a connection, not just to the letters, but to the act of remembering itself. The ancient process by which thought and being were reflected in the silent song of the unknown. For a long moment, the valley seemed to hold its breath. The ruins pulsed gently, alive with the memory of a civilization that had once understood the world in a language beyond words. The traveler understood the fragility of this knowledge and the necessity of listening deeply, moving slowly, and letting meaning arise naturally, without force or expectation. Then a soft wind drifted through the corridor, carrying dust and faint light. The glyphs dimmed slightly, settling back into their slow rhythm. The travelers stepped away from the monolith, feeling the residue of resonance within themselves. The lost language was no longer fully hidden. It was awake, waiting, its pulse echoing softly in stone, air, and heart. As the sun climbed higher, the ruins glimmered with quiet life. The unknown's presence was felt everywhere, not as form but as rhythm, pattern, awareness. The traveler smiled faintly, understanding that the language was not gone. It had only chosen to wait, patient as always, until someone could perceive it again. The lost language of the unknown remained, hidden in the folds of stone and thought, eternal and serene, waiting to be remembered by those who could listen with more than ears, see with more than eyes, and feel with the depth of being itself. The traveler awoke beneath a pale dawn, the valley cloaked in quiet, delicate light. The ruins seemed to exhale slowly, their stones holding warmth from the sun, yet cool with the memory of centuries. Each step felt deliberate, measured, as if time itself had slowed to match the rhythm of the ancient city. The unknown's language, now faintly pulsing across walls and floors, carried a resonance that the traveler could almost feel in their chest. Every symbol seemed to vibrate with a subtle energy, not random, but precise, a heartbeat echoing through the stone and through the very air. It was the rhythm of continuity, a cadence older than memory itself. As they walked through the central courtyard, the traveler noticed the glyphs shifting slightly, not their shapes, but their flow. Lines of light arched gracefully, connecting one symbol to another. The movement was slow, like tides advancing over distant shores, carrying with them a quiet message. The traveler realized this was not merely the present. They were witnessing time itself, reflected in the unknown. They paused, placing a hand on a carved pillar. The vibrations traveled up their arm, deep and resonant, and suddenly the world around them felt layered. The ruins of the city were not just the past, they were alive within the present, echoing forward into possibilities yet unseen. The traveler's mind expanded, perceiving the continuity of events in ways words could not capture. The fall of the city, the scattering of the unknown, the forgotten languages of humankind. All these moments were linked by an invisible thread. Each ripple in the stone, each pulse of light, reverberated through past, present, and future simultaneously. A soft wind stirred the dust and moss along the ruins, carrying faint reflections of the Unown's light. The symbols responded, moving in arcs and spirals, forming patterns that seemed to reach outward, beyond the valley. The traveler understood that these patterns were not static. They were alive with the memory of what had been and the promise of what might be. For a long time, they simply stood, absorbing the flow. The pulse beneath their feet deepened, vibrating through stone, bone, and thought. The air itself seemed to thrum with hidden currents, invisible yet perceptible, like the quiet hum of the universe bending to its own rhythm. Then, a subtle shift occurred. The unknown began to appear once more. faint forms rising from cracks in the stones, glowing softly in response to the traveler's presence. They moved with infinite patience, orbiting around the central courtyard in slow, deliberate paths. Each motion traced a sequence of connections, a visual representation of cause and effect, beginnings and endings, actions stretching across time, like threads in an endless tapestry. The traveler felt themselves drawn into the rhythm. Each step, each breath, aligned with the currents of light and motion. They realized that the unknown did not simply exist. In time, they were time, or at least the reflection of its pulse. The rhythm of the symbols, the alignment of their movement, echoed the vast interconnection of all moments. From the distant past to the distant future, images began to rise within the mind, not as visions, but as impressions. The city alive with people, the symbols floating in the air, generations passing in endless cycles. The traveler perceived the rise and fall of civilizations, the quiet creation of moments, the threads of thought and intention stretching across the ages. Time was not a line. It was a living web, vibrating in sync with the letters of the unknown. They reached out, fingertips brushing the air. The light shimmered under their touch, expanding and contracting in response. Each pulse carried a story, each vibration a memory, each flicker a possibility yet to unfold. The traveler understood that the resonance of time was not something to control. It could only be observed, felt, and honored. The wind shifted, lifting faint dust motes into streams of light that intertwined with the floating glyphs. The traveler turned slowly, tracing the flow with their eyes, feeling the subtle pull of each moment as it resonated across existence. The valley itself seemed alive with history and potential, each stone, each symbol, vibrating in quiet harmony with the greater rhythm of reality. The Unown floated higher now, forming spirals and concentric arcs above the ruins. Their glow illuminated the traveler, soft and gentle, as though allowing them to see the infinite connections that linked past, present, and future. Every heartbeat, every breath, every step taken by any being in the world was reflected here, woven into the tapestry of existence through the silent song of the letters. The traveler felt their own smallness in the face of such immensity, yet not fear, only awe. The resonance of time was not overwhelming. It was patient, eternal, unjudging. They understood that their presence mattered only insofar as they perceived, only insofar as they listened. Awareness itself became a part of the pattern, another thread in the infinite design. Slowly, the Unown dispersed, drifting toward the edges of the ruins. Their light softened, blending with the rising sun. The hum diminished, fading into a gentle vibration that seemed to linger in the chest and mind long after the forms vanished. The traveler remained standing in the center of the courtyard, breathing slowly, sensing the quiet pulse of existence beneath their feet. The ruins were still, yet alive, in a way that could only be felt, not described. Time, memory, and possibility had converged into a subtle song, a resonance that existed beyond perception, yet was accessible to those who knew how to listen. The traveler turned to the horizon, the valley bathed in warm, golden light. They knew that the resonance of time would remain with them, a quiet current beneath thought and awareness, a song of past and future, echoing gently in the present. With one final breath, they stepped forward, carrying the knowledge of the infinite web of moments in every silent heartbeat. The traveler moved deeper into the ruins, their steps slow, deliberate, almost reverent. The sunlight had softened to a warm amber hue, spilling over the stones and casting long, gentle shadows that stretched like whispers across the ground. The valley around them was silent, yet the air vibrated faintly, carrying a subtle pulse that seemed to emanate from the ruins themselves. The Unown were near, though invisible to the untrained eye. Their presence was felt as vibrations in the air, soft shifts in light and warmth, subtle ripples that traced the edges of perception. The traveler could feel them more acutely than ever before, a quiet awareness, patient and observing, waiting to reveal the fragments of memory hidden within the stone. They approached a circular chamber at the heart of the ruins, where the glyphs etched into the walls formed dense, intricate patterns. Each symbol pulsed faintly with life, like the residual heartbeat of an ancient consciousness. The traveler knelt and traced a finger along the carvings, feeling the vibrations travel through their fingertips, up their arm, and into their chest. Then, the first shadow appeared. It was faint, ephemeral, a ripple in the air, like a breath of mist shaped by memory. It hovered near the glyphs, shifting slowly, and the traveler sensed that it was not separate from the Unown. It was a fragment of their essence, a lingering piece of consciousness from times long past. More shadows began to emerge, drifting gently through the chamber. Each one was distinct, yet all were connected by the soft hum that filled the air. They were not solid shapes, but forms of light and thought, impressions of lives once intertwined with the language of the unknown. The traveler could sense glimpses of their experiences: curiosity, joy, sorrow, moments of creation, moments of quiet contemplation. Each shadow carried a fragment of memory, a whisper of existence preserved in the patterns of the symbols. The traveler realized that the unknown were not mere letters, they were vessels, each holding the essence of those who had known and used their language. Every glyph was a container of remembrance, every symbol a mirror reflecting the echoes of lives long gone. As the traveler moved among the shadows, they felt the memories brush against their mind, like gentle currents. A faint sense of laughter, a rush of wind through a city long vanished, the delicate trace of someone's gaze as they shaped a word with intention. All of it flowed around the traveler, not chaotic, but arranged in a quiet, deliberate harmony. The shadows shifted in response to the traveler's presence, forming shapes that echoed their movements, guiding them deeper into the chamber. The air seemed to thicken with the weight of countless experiences, yet the pressure was gentle, comforting, like the embrace of a timeless awareness. One shadow lingered longer than the others, brighter and more defined. The traveler reached out, and it responded, extending itself in faint, luminous tendrils. Images flowed into the traveler's mind. A city alive, with people speaking, not with words, but with thought. Letters drifting in the air, like petals on a river. A civilization built on the resonance of understanding rather than sound. The traveler understood that the shadows were memories of the city itself, fragments of life preserved within the unknown, lingering long after the streets had fallen silent. They were the record of creation, the echo of thought shaping reality, now resting quietly within the ruins. Other shadows joined, forming gentle arcs and circles around the traveler. The chamber became a web of memory, a silent dance of light and thought. Each pulse, each flicker of the shadows, carried a story, a moment preserved from the long past. The traveler could sense them not as individual events, but as a continuous thread, a tapestry of awareness flowing through time and space. They sat in the center of the chamber, closing their eyes and letting the shadows move around them. The memories were not overwhelming. They were gentle, quiet, resonant. The traveler could feel the weight of ages and the depth of understanding held in the Unown's presence. It was a reminder that nothing is ever truly lost. Every thought, every intention, every moment of awareness lingers, waiting to be perceived again. The shadows slowly began to fade, retreating into the walls, the air, the silent hum of the ruins. Yet the traveler remained calm, carrying the impression of what they had witnessed. The memories were not gone. They had merely returned to the subtle pulse of the city, waiting to be remembered once more by those who would listen. The traveler rose, stepping carefully through the chamber. The air felt alive, filled with quiet resonance. The ruins no longer seemed empty or desolate. They were alive, with memory, aware, patient, Every stone, every symbol, every shadow held a story, a fragment of life preserved in the eternal song of the unknown. As the traveler moved toward the courtyard, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the ruins. The shadows of memory lingered faintly in their mind, a gentle echo that would accompany them as they explored the depths of the city further. And in the stillness, the traveler understood the truth of the unknown, that memory, intention, and awareness were inseparable. The past was never lost. It lived in the pulse of the letters, in the subtle vibrations of stone, and in the quiet heart of those who took the time to listen. The traveler entered the deepest corridor of the ruins, where the stones seemed older, smoother, and heavier with time. The air carried a faint warmth, mixed with the coolness of shadow. Each step echoed softly, yet the sound seemed swallowed by the presence of something vast and unseen. The further they went, the more the ruins seemed to pulse with quiet life. Here, the glyphs carved into the walls were dense, intricate, and luminous. They shimmered faintly, as if aware of the traveler's passage, waiting for their presence to awaken the subtle currents of meaning within the stone. Every surface radiated a gentle energy, a vibration that resonated deep in the chest and along the spine. The traveler's hands traced the carvings lightly. The glyphs responded, pulsing with light in slow waves that ran along the walls. These were no longer merely letters. They were conduits, channels of energy, memory, and awareness flowing through the ancient stones. Each pulse of light felt alive, conscious, deliberate. They moved forward, following the subtle flow of energy deeper into the ruins. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, circular and unbroken, its ceiling lost in shadow. The air here was thick with resonance, vibrating faintly with the pulse of the unknown. The traveler felt as though they had crossed a threshold into the very essence of the city, where its heart beat with quiet power. At the center of the chamber lay a raised platform, carved from a single monolith. Its surface glowed faintly, inscribed with spiraling glyphs that seemed older and more profound than any the traveler had seen before. The light radiated softly, warm and patient, like the memory of creation itself. The traveler approached the platform with reverence, placing a hand upon its smooth surface. The glyphs pulsed in response, spreading waves of subtle energy outward. A soft hum filled the chamber, not loud but deep, vibrating through the very bones. It was a resonance that connected the ruins, the traveler, and the unseen presence of the unknown. Images unfolded in the traveler's mind, vast cities of light and stone, long forgotten, where beings moved gracefully among floating symbols. The Unown hovered in their invisible forms, guiding thought and shaping reality. Each letter, each movement, carried the weight of intention, the power to create and preserve. The traveler felt the presence of countless lifetimes, memories not their own, yet familiar in the deepest sense. The Unown had recorded not just language, but existence itself. The flow of thought, the rhythm of life, the delicate balance of creation. Here, at the heart of the ruins, that power was most pure, most complete. A soft light emerged from the platform, forming shapes that hovered above the traveler's head. They were letters, yet more than letters, symbols of intent, energy, and life, twisting together in an eternal dance. The traveler realized that this was the origin of the unknown, the core of their purpose: to capture the essence of thought, to mirror consciousness, to preserve meaning beyond the limits of time. The hum deepened, and the traveler felt the flow of energy around them as if the ruins themselves were breathing. The unknown's essence was here, concentrated and radiant, forming a silent network of awareness that connected the chamber to every corner of the valley. Every symbol carved in stone, every memory recorded in shadow. The traveler placed both hands on the platform. They sensed the origin of the unknown, born not from words or spoken thought, but from the need to preserve awareness, to make memory eternal, to ensure that every fragment of understanding could be reflected, remembered, and shared. Light moved across the chamber, tracing spirals that seemed to reach out toward infinity. The traveler saw the first beings who had used the Unown, learning the subtle balance of creation, shaping worlds not through power, but through intent. The ruins were not a tomb. They were a living memory, a nexus of thought made tangible. The soft hum continued, and the traveler closed their eyes. They understood that the heart of the ruins was both beginning and continuation. Time, thought, and meaning converged here, sustained by the quiet pulse of symbols and the patient vigilance of the Unown. When the traveler opened their eyes, the chamber seemed to glow with a serene light, as if acknowledging the presence of one who could perceive and respect its depths. The heart of the ruins had shared its secret. The Unown were not merely letters. They were the essence of reflection, the custodians of memory, and the keepers of the language of thought itself. The traveler remained a moment longer, breathing in the stillness, feeling the resonance in every part of their being. Then, slowly, they stepped back, leaving the monolith at the center, glowing quietly, patient, eternal. The chamber was silent once more, yet alive, its heart beating softly in rhythm with the pulse of the world. As they ascended toward the outer corridors, the traveler felt a profound understanding settle within them. The ruins were not gone. They were awake, conscious, and waiting for those who could listen, observe, and honor the silent song of the Unown. The traveler emerged from the inner chamber, the light of the ruins cascading softly over their path. The sun hung low above the distant mountains, stretching shadows across the valley, painting the ruins with quiet gold. The air vibrated faintly with the pulse of the Unown, and the traveler felt the rhythm of understanding settling deeper within their mind. Each step through the courtyard carried weight, not of the body, but of thought. The symbols embedded in the stone seemed alive, subtle arcs of energy tracing patterns in the air. The traveler's gaze followed them, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, comprehension began to bloom. The letters were no longer isolated signs. They were threads of connection, linking every living being, every thought, every ripple of intention. The traveler paused, closing their eyes and breathing deeply. The hum of the ruins grew in resonance, faint but clear, carrying the weight of ages. In that quiet, they sensed the hidden ties that bound the unknown to the world around them. The letters were not merely reflections. They were keys, resonant forms that linked consciousness with the very essence of life. Images arose gently, as if summoned by the rhythm itself. They saw a river flowing, and the currents traced the curves of letters. They saw wind brushing through the trees, and the rustle of leaves formed subtle patterns in harmony with the glyphs. Even the movements of Pokémon in the wild echoed the same vibrations, as if their energy, thought, and presence were part of the silent song of the symbols. The traveler's mind expanded with the realization. The Unown were aware of life, not as observers, but as conduits. Each letter held knowledge of motion, of balance, of intention. The ruins themselves were alive with this understanding, waiting for those patient enough to perceive the connections that stretched unseen across the world. A soft glow emerged from the courtyard stones. The Unown began to gather, faintly visible now, forming loose circles around the traveler. Their light was gentle but deliberate, each pulse carrying subtle meaning. The traveler felt the words of the symbols not in language, but in thought, in sensation, in the quiet expansion of awareness. With each step, the connections deepened. The traveler perceived how every Pokémon's essence resonated with certain glyphs, how abilities and instincts echoed the same patterns of energy, how bonds between trainers and Pokémon formed bridges between letter and intention. It was not magic, nor luck. It was harmony, the silent design of the world encoded in shapes, vibrations, and thought. The traveler knelt, tracing a spiral of glyphs with their hand. The light responded, brightening softly, and within the rhythm they sensed the hidden knowledge of creation. The Unown did not teach with words, but through resonance. through the gentle pull of awareness. To perceive the pattern was to understand the balance of life itself. Slowly, the chamber filled with subtle movement, shadows of memory, faint echoes of ancient guardians, drifted alongside the glowing symbols. They were not separate from the Unown. They were extensions of the same awareness, fragments of wisdom preserved across time. The traveler could feel the weight of centuries, not as oppression, but as the patient unfolding of understanding. They rose, standing in the center of the courtyard, and for the first time, the traveler felt a complete connection to the pulse of the ruins. Knowledge did not arrive as explanation. It arrived as alignment. The quiet sensation of being in harmony with something far greater than oneself. Every breath, every heartbeat, every flicker of thought was mirrored in the glow of the Unown. The traveler realized that the awakening of knowledge was not about mastery. It was about perception. It was about listening, seeing, and feeling the world as a network of intent, energy, and vibration. The ruins, the symbols, the Unown, and the very valley were all threads in the same infinite tapestry, waiting for someone willing to resonate with them. The sun dipped lower, casting a soft, warm light across the courtyard. The Unown dispersed gently, their faint forms drifting into the air, leaving trails of subtle glow that lingered like a heartbeat. The hum of resonance remained, faint and patient, a reminder of the knowledge now awakened in the traveler's mind. With one last glance at the ruins, the traveler began to walk toward the exit, their steps lighter, their awareness deeper. The lessons of the symbols would remain. Quiet, but unending. A rhythm woven into every perception, every thought, every future step. The awakening of knowledge was complete, not as understanding of words, but as communion with the silent song that bound the world together. The traveler stepped out of the ruins, the warm light of late afternoon spilling across the valley. The stones behind them seemed quieter now, yet alive in memory, their pulse lingering faintly in the air like the last note of a song. Every breath carried the resonance of the Unown. Every step echoed with the rhythm of thought that had awakened deep within the ruins. Beyond the walls, the world stretched wide and infinite. Rolling hills met distant forests, rivers glinted in the fading sun, and Pokémon moved gently through the wild, unaware of the silent language that wove through every living thing. The traveler felt the weight of this realization, a quiet awe that pressed gently upon their heart. Every movement, every life, seemed to hum with the same pulse they had felt in the ruins. The language of the unknown had not remained confined to stone. It flowed outward, subtle and invisible, shaping the harmony of existence. The traveler realized that what they had learned in the ruins could now be applied in the world beyond. Awareness, resonance, and the quiet power of perception. As they walked, the symbols from the ruins lingered in their vision, faint traces of light that shifted and flowed like ribbons of thought. They sensed the hidden currents that connected people, Pokémon, and nature. Each interaction, each intention, each step of a creature or human was a note in the silent song of the world. The traveler paused near a small river, watching the water ripple over stones. The pattern of motion mirrored the curves and spirals of the glyphs, and they understood that the language of the Unown was not limited to walls or ruins. It was everywhere, waiting to be perceived. The river sang in the same rhythm as the symbols, and the Pokémon drinking from its edge reflected that harmony naturally, instinctively. They walked on, noticing subtle alignments, the swaying of trees, the flight of birds, the paths of Pokémon, as if each movement traced an invisible script across the land. The traveler's senses had expanded, attuned to the rhythm that once seemed hidden. The world was alive with the silent language, its power soft but persistent, flowing through everything without distinction. At the edge of a forest, a gentle wind stirred the leaves, carrying a faint shimmer of light like the glow of distant glyphs. The traveler felt the pull of memory and understanding converge, realizing that every symbol in the ruins was but a reflection of this greater pattern. The language of the Unown was a bridge, It connected perception with reality, thought with action, mind with world. The traveler paused, closing their eyes. In that silence, they perceived the interwoven harmony of all things. The valley, the Pokémon, the humans who would one day wander these lands, the wind, the water, and the very stones beneath their feet. Everything resonated with the same song, the same pulse, and it was infinite, patient, and serene. The path led them upward, over hills, and through fields bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Each step felt guided, deliberate, yet free. The traveler sensed that the journey beyond the ruins was not merely physical. It was a continuation of the awakening begun within. Awareness itself became a compass, pointing toward harmony, reflection, and understanding. As dusk approached, the traveler saw a distant peak where the sky met the mountains. Light from the setting sun touched its summit, scattering in patterns that mirrored the glyphs of the ruins. The world seemed to fold gently into itself, each element echoing the hidden language of the Unown. The traveler smiled, feeling the resonance deep in their chest. They had left the heart of the ruins, yet the song continued, flowing through the world. Each heartbeat, each breath, each perception became a note in the eternal rhythm. The journey beyond was not an end, it was an extension, a living continuation of understanding, harmonizing with every movement and thought encountered along the way. Night fell gradually, stars scattering across the sky like luminous glyphs in motion. The traveler paused, looking upward. The constellations seemed to pulse faintly, as if mirroring the silent song that flowed through the valley, the ruins, and the heart of every living being. They understood. The language of the Unknown was everywhere, eternal and patient, waiting for those willing to listen, perceive, and resonate with its subtle, infinite rhythm. With the night settling around them, the traveler continued onward, carrying within themselves the quiet awakening of knowledge, the reflection of memory, and the enduring harmony of the world. Night had fully descended over the valley, folding the world into a quiet, velvety darkness. Stars glittered faintly above, scattered like the scattered letters of the Unknown, each point of light resonating softly in the infinite sky. The traveler stood on a gentle hill, gazing across the ruins that had shaped their understanding, feeling the pulse of awareness that flowed from stone to air, from mind to world. The journey through the ruins had changed something fundamental. The traveler now sensed the silent song that threaded through all existence, the harmony of thought, intention, and being. Every shadow, every ripple of wind, every movement of a Pokémon across the land carried subtle resonance, invisible yet undeniably present. The Unknown were everywhere, not as forms to be seen, but as forces to be felt, eternal and patient. A soft vibration rose beneath the traveler's feet, almost imperceptible, yet steady and reassuring. It spread outward, connecting the ruins, the valley, the forests, and the distant mountains. The rhythm was constant, like a heartbeat shared by all things. The traveler realized this was the eternal echo, the resonance of awareness itself, vibrating across time and space, unbroken and serene. They closed their eyes, letting the sensation flow through every fiber of their being. Past, present, and future seemed to merge into one continuous moment, infinite, yet immediate. Every memory preserved within the ruins, every thought carried by the Unknown, every experience of life itself coalesced into a single harmonious song. The shadows of memory, faint traces of lives long past, drifted gently across the traveler's mind. They were not haunting but comforting, a reminder that existence left impressions that endured beyond immediate perception. Each echo resonated with purpose, reflecting the ongoing cycle of thought, creation, and understanding. The traveler breathed slowly, each inhale and exhale aligning with the rhythm of the valley. The Unknown's presence flowed around them, subtle yet tangible, each symbol of light a note in the eternal melody. The letters no longer seemed distant or separate. They were an extension of the traveler's own awareness, a bridge between self and world, between silence and comprehension. Above, the stars shifted faintly, their points of light forming spirals and patterns that mirrored the shapes of the ruins below. The traveler felt a profound connection to all that existed, as if the very universe had joined in the silent song. The pulse of the unknown, the flow of life, the rhythm of thought, all were echoes of one continuous resonance, eternal and unending. The traveler extended a hand, imagining the energy flowing through the air and into the stars. Every movement, every gesture, every thought became part of the harmony. The ruins, the valley, the Pokémon roaming freely, and the distant sky all vibrated with the same echo, the same quiet understanding. They realized that the journey had not been about learning words or understanding symbols or mastering thought. It had been about awakening to the presence of resonance, the knowledge that awareness itself, in its patient, quiet flow, was eternal. The Unown had never merely preserved letters. They had preserved life, perception, and the silent harmony connecting all things. The traveler turned back to the ruins one last time. The stones glowed faintly in the moonlight, soft and serene, as if acknowledging the understanding now carried forward. The unknown song continued, faint yet enduring, threading through stone, air, mind, and world. It would never fade, and neither would the awareness it awakened. With one final breath, the traveler continued their path, moving into the quiet night with calm certainty. Every step carried the rhythm of the eternal echo, a pulse that resonated within and beyond, a silent song connecting all things across time, space, and thought. And in the infinite quiet, the attendar, traveler knew, the resonance of life, memory, and awareness would endure, patient and serene, forever echoing through the world, forever waiting to be perceived again.